Hello, today I'm here to present our project, La Vierge 2020, a production which has been about 8 years in the making. To begin with, my name is Brian Katz. I'm a research director with the CNRS at the Sorbonne University. My areas of interest are room acoustics, spatial hearing, and virtual reality. I'm head of the Sound Spaces research team with the LAM group, and I'm co-director of the acoustics working group at the Chantier Scientifique at Notre-Dame. So our project is clearly situated in the context of the Notre-Dame Cathedral fire 2 years ago. Before the extent of the damage was fully assessed, one of the concerns raised immediately after the fire was the loss of the acoustic heritage associated with this historic site. In response, two research projects were formed, FAY and FEND, named after the phoenix, both of which received funding on the question of acoustic heritage and with a connection to Notre-Dame. La Vierge 2020 came about during the events of 2020 as a sequel to our Ghost Orchestra production in 2015. That production was about 4 or 5 minutes long and allowed a virtual fly-through of the cathedral during a concert performance. To commemorate the International Year of Sound and the 1-year anniversary of the fire, we decided to attempt a full-length version of the Ghost Orchestra production, though audio only, to provide a means for the world to experience the acoustics of Notre-Dame as it was before the fire. This was, of course, during COVID at the time of the strictest lockdown period in France. The concert recording we used was a performance of La Vierge in 2015 in the cathedral. This monumental piece is for a large orchestra, an adult and children's choir, and several soloists located high in the tribune at specific moments. 45 proximity microphones were used to capture the performance, along with a number of ambient microphones suspended around the hall. The close mic recordings were repositioned into an acoustic simulation of Notre-Dame to provide a realistic spatial reproduction, allowing listeners to experience the concert at different positions. Directivity patterns were defined for each section, and 4 binaural receivers were chosen for this production. All the room acoustic simulations were carried out using Katz Acoustic version 9, Tuck 2. The original 2013 artistic mix was a classical music post-production style, the listeners positioned at the conductor's podium being immersed in the performance. The mixing goal searched for a balance between realism and musical readability without constraints to physical possibility, so that we could hear certain instruments much better than in reality if we were actually sitting at the concert. For this virtual production, the goal was with realism for the listener, based on actual listening position. The balance and levels of each track were adjusted to the conductor's position, using recordings at the conductor's position as a reference. From those settings, the tracks were then rendered through the binaural impulse responses of all the other listening positions, without alteration. This provided a realistic rendering of being at the actual concert, as a spectator rather than listening to an idealized recording production over the radio. There were various limitations to our production. First and foremost was that this was all carried out during COVID confinement, meaning that we were all at home, either working on remote machines or using the machines that we had available to us. On the recording, the limitation dealt with the lack of pure crosstalk rejection, because some microphones picked up other instruments, which kind of gave a blurring when both are rendered. Attempts were made to mute certain tracks to limit this when that instrument wasn't playing, but that can't be done when all the instruments are playing. This results in certain phasing effects being audible at certain times. Another limitation was a moment when the children's choir is walking through the audience area and there were no proximity microphones available. For these, the ambient microphones that are suspended above them were used and directly been rendered binaurally, not using the room acoustic response, but just using HRTF rendering. Finally, the HRTF was hard-coded in this production to provide an easy distribution method, not requiring head trackers or VR equipment, as because people were expected to listen to the entire concert, which was about an hour and a half. So therefore, the binaural headlock stereo was chosen as the platform. As a result, there can be some degradation in spatial audio quality due to non-individual HRTFs and fixed head orientation. Different excerpts at different positions can be listened to, including the 2013 artistic mix. We included a questionnaire. Finally, it was possible to listen to the entire concert from any of these positions, like a spatial audio radio production. Access statistics for the website give us some information which can be useful for future productions. Ignoring search engines and bots, we see about 450 visits to the website lasting more than 3 minutes and almost 200 lasting more than an hour. While the majority originated in France, we have visits from many countries all around the world. Most visits were via desktop computers. Of the 34% using mobile devices, half were using the iOS operating system. The Chrome browser was the most common, followed by other common browsers. More detailed information was available via the questionnaire, having 31 complete responses. Ages were varied over the full spectrum. Wi-Fi interconnections were favored 5 times more than any other means of connection, with people using better than average quality headphones. Familiarity with binaural rendering and room acoustic simulations ranged from none to professional, not unexpected considering the subject of this production and the way it was advertised. Familiarity with Notre-Dame itself ranged from never to regular visits, with less having participated in concert performance. However, all had been to a concert in a church at least once. This general repertoire of responses shows that it satisfied what our main goals were in trying to provide a production to the general public who weren't able to participate in Notre-Dame or who weren't familiar with it. Comparing the listening positions, listeners clearly noticed the differences in the acoustics. The production was considered quite realistic, though it would seem that there is some room for improvement. The difficulty due to the absence of image was noted, and this is also known to affect realism perception in general. Preferences for different positions favored the conductor's position and the artistic mix. However, we note that each position received both the highest and lowest preference rating by at least one listener. Overall, the questionnaire results showed a high favorability of 87%. Roughly the same proportion will favorable for future productions, including live streaming performances in the virtual space, one of the projects that we're considering. I invite you to consult the website and conference paper for more details on the acoustics and history of Notre-Dame in a musical sense. We would finally like to thank the cathedral musicians for supporting this work over the years. I would be happy now to try and answer any of your questions.